name is Lacy, and you are listening to More Than Child's Play with your host, my mommy, Lacy Morisi, and my Aunt Nicole Surgeon. They are authors, therapists, and most importantly, mommies. And man, can they talk. So sit back and relax and learn from their village. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of More Than Child's Play podcast. This is Lacy Morisi, pediatric speech-language pathologist, and today I am excited to be joined by Kimberly Scanlon. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to introduce you, Kim, a little more formally to our audience. Kimberly Scanlon is a licensed and certified speech-language pathologist, best-selling author, and parent who's helped countless individuals and families learn to joyfully communicate via her speech therapy sessions, books, newsletters, and workshops. Her best-selling book, My Toddler Talks, is a favorite among practicing speech-language pathologists, including myself, and professionals who work in early intervention. Kimberly's latest book, My Toddler's First Words, was awarded the Kirkus Star, one of the most coveted designations in the book industry. In addition to her books, Kimberly's writing and expertise has been featured in Parents, Care.com, The Washington Post, Ashosphere, and the Student Doctor Network. Kimberly has been interviewed on numerous podcasts and today on More Than Child's Play podcast and provides engaging, informative workshops. A lifetime learner, Kimberly has earned 4 ASHA ACE Awards for her continuing education. Kim and I connected many years ago as we both kind of, were working as speech language pathologists, also creating products for families to work with their children that, outline developmentally appropriate milestones and how to support that development for their kids. So again, we connected years ago on social media, I believe, probably through Facebook, and took turns promoting each other's products and just have known each other since then. So it's nice to have you today, Kim, to actually get to have a conversation with you that's not just through email or Facebook messaging. So I'm excited for you to join us. And I just, like I just mentioned a moment ago, your resources I have found so helpful and have also recommended them to families in supporting their child's language development and speech development. So I just wanted to bring you on to kind of talk about those early developmental milestones when it comes to language. Parents, any parent out there knows their kids should talk at some point. I think there's a lot of misinformation about when that first word should come. And then also I feel like parents kind of get stuck on just the words and don't always appreciate all of those steps that have to happen to get to that first word. Because when it just happens without, any hiccup along the way, it just kind of, the stages come by and go so quickly, and we don't get to appreciate the whole process that happens before that first word. So again, just wanted to bring you on so that you can share your knowledge and wisdom with our audience and help out practitioners in the field, but also families that are trying to help their little ones, start talking and get communicating. So let's just start with the basics. So first words. Major milestone. Again, everyone knows their baby should talk at some point. But when should parents be hearing those first words? And how many words should a kiddo be saying by 12 months, 18 months, 24 months?
Right. Okay. So that's a great question. And that's something that as a speech therapist like yourself who works with a lot of the young kids and their families, it's something that we're asked about a lot. So when a child is brought into the early intervention system or a parent brings them to a private speech therapist, I think it's important to note that the speech therapist isn't just concerned, and you kind of hinted at this, isn't just concerned about what they're saying. They're looking at like the whole child, and they're looking at everything the child's doing, because play is really important to, in the first 3 years of life. It's like there's a strong association between how a child plays and how they're thinking, right? Because what a child is doing with a toy or with an object, or how they're engaging with you to show that joy, really helps with the whole language learning process. So before a first word emerges, there's so many other things that we have to even consider, which I know we're probably not going to have enough time to get into too much of that. But I just want to quickly highlight, like, So the first words typically emerge anywhere from like 9 months, early, to 15 months, right? 12 months is usually when most kids have their first word.
Mhm.
But I think that if your child doesn't have a first word by 15 months, that's sometimes an indicator that, oh wait, maybe we should see like what's going on here. What may be missing from what they're doing that we can work on. So, you look back at the case history, because when you take a new client on, you do you do a case history. You look to see what they're doing during the session or during the evaluation. You look to see if they're looking at the parent to engage them, that they have some of that, what we call joint attention. Do they want to share what they're doing with the parent? Do they look when a parent tries to get their attention or someone else? Do they have any gestures? How are they playing? Is it like age appropriate? Is it developmentally appropriate? And then we look to see, are they making any sounds, or are they just kind of quiet? And then I think, and it's also very important to note too, like when we see a child for the first time, that's just a snapshot. That doesn't mean like this is what they're doing all the time, but I think that's why it's really important, if you're a clinician, to really involve the parent even in the evaluation process, because they're the ones who know their kids. So whenever I start an evaluation, I'm like, okay, I want you to like come in here and play with the child. And I want to see, because there are really no great assessments for this age group, as we know. I mean, so a lot of it, we're trying to get the information from so many different sources, so we get a full picture. So that's what I would say. I tend to go with more averages, or ranges, I should say, when I think of like first words, when they should have word combinations, rather than the milestones. And that's only because I find that with a milestone, like it's what a majority of the children are doing, right? And so I think when you have a missed milestone, that is something that is more meaningful to maybe a clinician or a parent to activate them to do something.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And those I think it's important to have that discussion, because there's confusion. Milestones are different than averages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the milestone would be at 12 months, I don't know it off the top of my head, 5 words, I think, is the milestone at 12 months, or?
I think I know that for in my book, I kept like the averages, and they were they were the norms. Okay. So I mean, for me, like that's what I usually go with, because what we know about child language development and just development in the first 3 years of life, it's so fast.
Yes.
So what could be considered typical could be, they don't get their first word, a single word, until, 14, 15 months. But I think it's important to know what they're doing before that. And Absolutely. And even with, like a lot of times, sometimes I'll get parents who say, oh, they have a lot of words in their vocabulary, but they're not combining them. Or they say a lot of words, but I don't feel like I can have a conversation with them. These are two separate issues. But I think that what a child tells us on the phone, or what we hear from them when they have their concerns, are so valid, because we have to, that kind of informs us on what we should look for, and what we have to could potentially guide treatment if what we're seeing is the same.
Right. So again, back to these milestones that we talk about, or that parents are made aware of, or that the doctor kind of communicates to the parents, these milestones, they're just one little piece of the puzzle, right? One little piece of the picture of the child. And I think that's what you're trying to say. Like, if we have a 12-month-old that doesn't have any words yet, but they're a good communicator, meaning that they point and they gesture and they give good eye contact, and they initiate by bringing mom a toy, and, kind of have other ways to engage and communicate, but without those words, then we might not be as concerned. But if we have a 12-month-old that has 20 words, but like you just said, aren't using those words in any functional way to request or to name things or people in their lives, then we might have concerns. So milestones exist for good reason, right? To give us a guideline, to help parents to know when there might be concerns. Mm-hmm. But again, I think you make a really good point that milestones and averages for developmental milestones, they're just one piece of what we're looking at when we evaluate a child, especially when it comes to communication, because talking is kind of the way that most of us communicate, but there's so many other ways that we communicate too. So those are just as important to look at when we evaluate children that come to us. Okay, good. All right. So, okay. So I see a lot of parents ask this question on social media, and also parents that I work with, I'm sure same with you.
Yes.
We'll start talking, okay, how many words does Johnny say? And they're like, well, not very many. And then as we start playing and interacting, I'm realizing, oh, he's saying all these animal sounds and he's saying wee, whoa, and uh-oh. And, so what counts as a word? What should parents officially count as a word in their child's vocabulary?
Okay. So a word is something that a child says, utters, produces that has meaning, right? It has to have meaning. It has to symbolize something. So, and it has to represent a concept. So something that they're thinking, and they have to be able to say that sound or that utterance, speech therapists like to say, on a regular, consistent basis and do it independently. And the reason why we say that is because if they're kind of doing it if they need to be prompted for it, or if they need to, it can only exist, when they're imitating, it means that they may not really fully understand that concept, or that, it doesn't count as a word. So you have to use the word multiple times in a lot of different contexts. And I guess as a parent, you have to try to ask yourself, do you really think my child understands that word, like understands what he's saying?
Right.
So that's what counts as a word. And the sound can, like, if you have a child who says the same sound every single time he sees the garbage truck, that's going to count as a word. If he points to the garbage truck and says, I'm trying to think like something that would be like poo. Let's just say he says poo. Because my son, he used to call the garbage truck the poo-poo truck.
Yeah, because it stinks.
and that would be 2 words, because you got poo-poo and then you have the truck, right?
Right.
But if he demonstrated that he understood that there were 2 separate concepts, right? But if he was saying it just as a holistic chunk, that's something we can talk about too, Lacy.
Yes.
The holistic chunks, like when they're just saying like a few different words together, but it's really representing one concept, like bye-bye. That's going to be 1 word. So, because it's representing one concept, right? So if your child says poo-poo every time he sees the garbage truck, this probably is not a good example, but let's just say,
no, it's perfect.
That's going to count as a word. That's going to count as a word for your child, because he's saying it every time. And let's say he's pointing to the truck and he's looking at you. And then that's when you as a parent can get in there like, yeah. And if you think it's cute that your kid's saying poo-poo, you can say poo-poo truck. That's the poo-poo truck. You can kind of add to a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you're more formal and you don't want him to say that, you can say, oh yeah, that's the garbage truck. Now, one thing, and I mentioned this in my toddler's first words, is, the reason why sometimes a young child who's just beginning to talk says some of these words like choo-choo instead of train, or mama instead of mommy, it's because their system is kind of getting warmed up to say these more complex sounds, or complex string of sounds, sequences of sounds. So they're going to go with what's easiest for them to say. So sometimes that first word, or those first few 50 words, 100 words even, are not going to sound like an adult's model, like an adult model.
Right. And I find that I talk to families a lot about that. That kids, I say we give kids the first 3 years, kind of that window of time to kind of work out how to say things in the same way that adults model them, because they need that practice, and they need to, that time to figure out how to move their tongue a certain way, or how to connect more syllables in a word. And we do, as SLPs, we give them that time to work those articulation, kind of that development out. So yeah, their words aren't going to sound exactly like ours, but I love that you mentioned, if your kid is calling the garbage truck the poo-poo, or if they see, I don't know, a ball, but say PP or whatever,
Right.
It's okay. You can let that go and enjoy the cuteness, because it will probably work out on its own. But if you would rather they say the correct word, then just modeling the correct word, not saying, no, that's not the poo-poo, that's the garbage. Just model garbage truck back to them so that they hear that correct model, but not necessarily shaming them or pointing out that it's wrong, because
that's a good point.
It will work out. So, okay. So first words can be actual words that we can understand, can be a version of a word that they're able to produce in that moment, as it can be a sound, as long as it is produced spontaneously on their own. They didn't have to hear the model first from us, and they use it consistently within the appropriate context. It counts,
Yeah.
right? That's a
Yeah.
word. Okay, good. I
Yeah.
think that's important because a lot of parents feel like their kids aren't talking or aren't saying very many words when they don't understand that all those things can count as words early on in
Right.
development.
And sometimes I even see the opposite. I'll see some parents who are like, oh, he has so many words. And then when you get in there, you realize that they're just imitating everything that their parents say. And they don't have a true understanding of what it might be. So
Sure.
I think that it's important to talk to parents about that.
Sure.
And I think that the best advice I received when I was in graduate school many, many moons ago was, and it's really funny because when I was a young clinician in grad school, I wasn't even a clinician then. The younger kids were not my specialty. I felt very, very awkward with them. Like I was kind of talking to them like I would an older child. And you kind of do have to I never talk down to kids, and now this is my specialty. So I'm like, I think I pride myself on being pretty good about it. But I just find that one thing a professor said to me is, if you are unsure of what is, what might be more typical, is to go to a playground. And you don't do this to make a parent feel bad or anything, but if they really don't understand like what their child should be doing, right? And they need a little bit more guidance. Sometimes, you can suggest maybe go to the park and see what's happening, and I think that there are a lot of parents who are hyper aware that their child is not where they should be. And the worst thing that can happen to them is that they feel hopeless. So I think as a clinician, it's really, really important for us to give our parents hope, to make them feel empowered, to make them feel that they can do something to help their child. And now that I'm a parent too, I feel like, I've been a parent for many years now, but the difference between being, I think, someone, when you get the information from a clinician who, I feel like when I was a beginning clinician, it was very easy for me to say things like, oh, well, just sit down and play for an hour with your kid, or don't ever let your child watch this TV show, limit the screen time. And I think that, particularly since I'm a working parent, I think that, most parents are really trying to do the best they can. And sometimes, just it doesn't always have to be perfect. We don't have to be perfect parents all the time, because that's impossible. And that's going to drive us crazy. I know I'm probably going off track here.
No, you're fine.
But I just felt like that was good to say, because I think parents need to hear it. So especially if they are concerned. And I think that, with the pandemic being close to an end, hopefully, God willing, I think parents have been very, very stressed out during this, and especially kids who might not have been able to get the services they needed, or if it was all virtual and they really wanted in person. I think that a lot of parents were really putting a lot of pressure on themselves, and that whatever you do, like if a parent feels stress, they're not going to be like their best self, right? Like, so they have to take care of themselves so they can take care of their child the best they can. So if a parent needs to, because I know we're probably going to get into like what we can do to help our child, talk, but I think that we also have to know what's going to work best for us.
Absolutely. And parents, and in the world of early intervention, we're all about empowering parents because they are the expert on their child. Whether at any age, the parent is always the expert on the child, and just making sure they know that, and that they're, an equal team member, if not the most important team member on their child's, early intervention team. But yeah, at any age working with a child, I think, educating the parent, empowering them, letting them know how much of a difference they can make in their child's life is so important for them. Yeah. And for their child's progress. So absolutely. I think that's a great point to make. Okay. So in one of your books, I think it's My Toddler's First Words, you have the list of the most common first words that we hear,
Yes.
right? And I think this is such a great list. And I believe, do you have this list for download off your, or is it just?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have it. So I have it on my website, mytoddlertalks.com. I have a free resource library. I have a lot of different PDFs that you can just download to your computer. So that is there, and it has like a cheat sheet strategy list of all different like evidence-based strategies that you can use to elicit and model first words, the word combinations, the common first words. So this common first words was derived from a few different resources. So it's not just words that I like kind of just put on here.
Yeah. First like.
Yeah. But you know, what we know about children's, the first common words are that they're usually words that are going to make sense to the child, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense to us.
Yes.
They're not going to be saying, and I put this in my book because I just think it's a good example. They're going to be saying go before they say a word like depart,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of the words are going to be straightforward. They're going to be words typically that are objects. And the reason why we say that mostly nouns is because if it's something that they can play with or manipulate or touch, they're getting extra feedback, right? It's making more sense to them. They can manipulate it. And also evidence shows that the noun is more concrete. It's there in front of you. Parents, especially, I believe it's parents that are more likely to speak English. There's research that shows that they usually model more nouns and they'll point to the nouns more. And then when a parent points to the noun, they're saying the word and pointing. So you're putting a gesture and you're putting the verbal input to the child. So they're able to like encode it better. So well, and I think that it's Korean or in Japan where they use more verbs. Like, and so verbs tend to be earlier developing sometimes because verbs are more pronounced in their language. But but common first words are typically words that are going to make sense that you can touch and manipulate. Now, what we do know is a lot of times if a child does have a language delay or disorder, or they're not talking when they should be, the verbs are so important for language development because they help us connect words together. They help us talk about the action. And do you ever have that book maybe in college or grad school, The Elements of Style?
No, I don't remember that
The
one.
Elements of Style was like a grammar guide book. It was a small little white book. I wish I had it. My husband had one too. I think I lost it. But anyway, in that, the author, and this is a book that I think it's probably like 50 years old, but in it he says the verb drives the sentence. And that's true. Like the verb is so powerful. And research supports, that was very new research and that's been replicated and stuff, supports that once we have those verbs, we can start to get to more of the word combinations. So that's going to be really important to target the verbs and the actions. If you have a child who has like a lot of words in their repertoire, but may not be combining them. Because then if you look at it, if you have what I have, sometimes I'll have a child, like a parent, if it's at the point where they have maybe 50 to 100 words, just keeping a little journal or something about the words. And then eventually they get to so many words that they can't keep track of it anymore. But then you just look to see if there's a pattern.
Yes.
If there's a pattern emerging, they're only saying nouns. Well, then you got to focus on some of these other words like verbs and adjectives, some social words, and you'll see some more of the word combinations emerge then.
Absolutely.
Because we don't speak just saying nouns. Although interestingly, when we are a toddler, we can point to something and say dog, and what the child might mean when they're pointing and saying dog, they could mean a whole different, like they could be pointing to the dog and saying, mommy, in their mind, mommy, do you remember when we went to grandma's house and we played with that cute dog next door? Like that, it can represent so many things. And when you're the parent, you are privy to that knowledge. And that's why it's so important for speech therapists who work with parents to bring their parents into the session, because you ever work with a child and you're playing with them or doing something, and the parents like, oh yeah, they're saying that or doing that because we just went to an amusement park over the weekend and this is what happened, or we just played with Johnny and Johnny does that. Like, oh, so then that if he's pointing to the dog, you can say something like grandma's dog, Nana's dog, or something that would elaborate the concept a little bit better.
Right, absolutely, because kids do use single words to represent a whole idea early on.
Yeah.
But unless, like you said, unless we're privy to what they might be thinking, we don't know what to model back to them to hopefully expand that utterance or that verbal phrase for them. So, keeping a word journal is something I encourage my families to do, because I think some parents don't realize maybe how many words their kid is saying. Some parents think their kid is saying, like you mentioned before, saying more words than they actually are spontaneously, because they're counting those imitated words, which we wouldn't count. We only count the words that are spontaneous, said independently by the child. But also, for the same thing you just mentioned, I'll ask parents to keep that word journal so we can then look a little more critically at, okay, how many nouns do we have? Do we have any verbs yet? And that kind of opens that door for that conversation. Before we can start putting words together, we need those verbs. We need a few little adjectives or positional words, some, in there to make a phrase. And I've found that to be so, the families that I can, talk into doing it, because it is just one little extra step in their day, but they really appreciate that. And wow, it's such a celebration, when I meet with them and they're like, oh yeah, I quit writing down all the words. He's just saying so many words. You're like, yay.
And another thing to consider too is like, how fast are they adding these words? Like I find that, if they get to a certain number in their vocabulary a lot, like usually it's like 50 words, you'll see, and this isn't all in every case, but you have a little bit of a word spurt. Sometimes it may not happen at 50, it may happen at 75, but it's
coming.
It's coming. So these are things for us to look for, and things that we can tell parents. So
yes, absolutely. So I love that. And I love your checklist. And again, it's free to download from her website, and I will link it in the podcast description and on social media. But this, like, it's just common first words. So your kiddo may not say every word on this list, but it's a nice guide to kind of, again, check in with, okay, we've got some nouns, but oh, look, maybe I can model these verbs for him today, or, whatever might be social words, whatever might be missing, just to kind of guide the parent and modeling relevant functional words for their kids. So that's great.
And I think I do go in at length too in the book, like which first word should you target? Like we want to be targeting, and as you know, we want to be targeting words that are meaningful and motivating to the child and are going to help them become a more functional communicator and get more of their, first we talk about requesting, because if they're not using any words, we want them to first start requesting for their needs and their wants. Then once they get past the requesting, then what do we do? I mean, then we take it to the next step. We talk about, sharing what they're, talking just about what they're seeing and playing with, labeling and commenting, and all these different social things that start to come up.
Right. And I often have a conversation with parents. A lot of toys don't lend themselves to the parent modeling functional vocabulary. Instead, I feel like a lot of toys lend themselves to naming colors, naming shapes, naming letters, naming numbers, and when we have a kiddo that's just starting to talk, not talking yet, not combining words, we're not worried about numbers and letters and shapes just yet, right? We want functional vocabulary, like you just mentioned, that they can use to request, vocabulary they can use to greet people or comment about what they're doing, action words. So, and that's a whole, the toy industry is a whole nother conversation for another day.
And I'll be honest, I love toys. I am like addicted to toys.
Yes. Oh, me too. But like those situations, I sit down with a parent and they start just, naming the colors of the blocks. I'm like, that's great. Certainly colors are important, typically not until a little bit later. Let's just model the word up while we stack these blocks up, and then down, or whatever. So, at no fault of the parent, they're doing what they know to be the best in the moment for their child. But once you kind of point that out to them, like, let's start working on some more functional words, what we in the SLP world refer to as core vocabulary, those power words for those little ones, so that, they have more functional vocabulary again, in their speech and in their talking. So, okay, Kim, so you have these resources. You've referenced already My Toddler's First Words, and then you also have a book called My Toddler Talks. And in both of these, you have an awesome amount of ideas and ways that parents and families can support their little one in learning to talk or expanding their language even after they're talking within daily routines, especially play. So you have so many ideas. We don't have enough time to share all those ideas, but what are like some of the heavy hitters, the major points of how families can support their child's language development at home?
Okay. So I'm a big believer in play. I love I believe that parents should play with their child. Now, when I say that, I don't mean as that you should, have to necessarily sit down and play with your child for an hour. You can do pops throughout the day. And I find that, if you do it 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, or you're finding what works for you and what works for your child. Like if you are a parent, and this happens sometimes, I'm sure you've seen this, Lacy, too, where you have parents who don't like to play. Okay. Yeah. Like I'll have like the dad who loves to do rough and tumble play, and the mom's like, I got a lot of stuff to do. I don't want to sit down and play, but I will have Susie come and cook with me, come and help me wash the dishes, come and help me throw some laundry in and press some of the buttons, So I think that it's really important to find out what the parents like to do. And then you can think about how you're going to incorporate the strategies. But I guess to answer your question though, so I believe in playing on a daily basis. What kind of play you like to do is up to you. Like you can do more rough and tumble play. You can do more structured play. Structured type play, I mean like sitting down maybe and just not being so gross motor. But in my toddler talks, I have 25 different activities I call them play routine. So it's like a step-by-step guide, and it tells you exactly kind of what to do and what to say and how to elicit the words. And I found that was very helpful because I guess I wrote this book back in 2011, 2012. And I still get parents and speech therapists emailing me saying, this book is so wonderful because it tells me exactly what to do. Yes. So when I find that, a lot of parents do need that, or even new clinicians need that. So if that's something that you're looking for, I think that book can be helpful. But, and if you're a parent who does like to play, other things that I really like to recommend is getting them involved in the daily routine. So figuring out like, okay, I know that getting them into the car seat, that's going to happen like 5 times a day. Mm-hmm. So I can put them up, and then you wait a little bit, and then they say up, right? You wait because you're modeling, you're using the same words each time you put them up and in the car seat. You're up and in. Okay, now we put the straps on and over, and then click. So you can add all these fun things in there. And if you do it on a regular basis, your kid starts to expecting it. And what we know about toddlers is they love routines. They love what they when they find something joyful that a parent responds to and likes, they really do want to please you. They really do want to try to do it. So that's one thing, involving them in a daily routine transition. It can be a transition, or it can be, taking a bath. Like maybe bath time is going to be the time where you're going to model the language and try to elicit language. It could be mealtime. Another thing is getting them involved in like little chores. If you're really busy and you have to, do 10,000 things, like bring them along with you. I mean, a lot of kids like to pretend to spray and wipe down they're not going to be good at it, but they can start. And I think that, pressing the buttons, it can just, those little tasks like that may seem so minor, but and I just feel like when they're toddlers and young, like they are motivated. They do want to do it, because then once they get a little bit older, then it's like, oh, wait a second. I want, this developmental progression is more like, wait a second, I'm my own person now. I want to do my own thing, right? Like to get more independent. But another thing I like to do is finger plays and songs, because you can do that anywhere. So I like finger plays and songs because there's rhythm, there's rhyme. They get to see what you're doing. So even simple ones, like you take your child's hand and you do round and round the garden like a teddy bear. 1 step, a 2 step, and a tickly under there. I mean, you could do this while you're waiting in the doctor's office, waiting in the car to pick up your older sibling. And then they can ask for it, right? And then they can try to do it to them. They can try to do it to you. And it just, those are some of the things I like to do. And then for screen time, as I said before, I know that sometimes, our kids are going to get screens no matter how, and I have to tell you, now that I'm a parent, I really admire the parents who don't have their kids watch any. I mean, I don't know if there's that many of them, but there are some. And I think it's always about pushing ourselves to a higher level, right? The next level, and setting high expectations or raising the bar. But I think that, and I wrote a blog post about this because I was inspired by the book Atomic Habits. I don't know if I read a lot of like self-improvement books.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
Atomic Habits is a great book because it was talking about, the little things that you do over the course of a day, or the little habits that you establish, end up making big changes because they compound on top of each other. And that's the same thing with our parenting, and same thing with language development. A little bit throughout the day is going to give us like a lot of input. A lot of massive change can happen then. So with screen time, if we develop a system so that we know, okay, after dinner, mommy doesn't look at her phone, daddy doesn't look at her phone, because if we're looking at our phones, we're modeling to our kids like, hey, wait a second, this phone's really important. This is what we want, and we're not paying as much attention, right? And you can do something else. I mean, I feel like when we get too much screen time, we're taking away from other opportunities to develop their skills, even if it's independent play.
Right.
Like teaching the child to play by themselves is very important.
Yes.
So having a system in place where you can try to come up with, maybe you have a shoebox filled with some toys that they really, really like. And I find that as a parent, we use screen time as a way for them to occupy themselves so we can get stuff done, right? Like that's when I give my children screens. I'm like, wait a second, I have a lot to do. But I think that if you start to create a system where you say, okay, before we watch TV, you guys are going to have some independent playtime. You guys are going to do this for a little bit, and then you can watch TV. Have something that works for you as a family. But I think that's particularly important if you have a child who has a language delay.
Right. Yes. And screen time, I mean, the recommendations from from pediatricians and other sources on child development, they're restrictive, because what we know, the research is, showing that it's not the best way for kids to learn from a screen. It, hands-on, multi-sensory type of learning is what's best at these young ages. But it's hard. We're all doing the best we can with what we know and where we are in our lives. So there's no guilt. We're not passing judgment on anyone. It's just when you know better, you do better. So, and small changes, sometimes with families, I'll, have a conversation about screen time recommendations and why a lot of screen time is not great in the early years for kids and their development. And I'll see this look of terror come over the parents' face, like, oh no, because we do need those screens sometimes to keep them busy because we've got a lot of things to do, as adults. But if we just start with small changes, just like you said, small changes, just how about we start with no screens an hour before bed? You know what I mean? If they're used to watching TV and then doing the bedtime routine, just a small little change there. Or maybe the screen doesn't come on until after breakfast time. So then they're like, okay, let's make, that sounds more doable versus cut all screens out altogether, because that's way too much and way too overwhelming for them. And then the child oftentimes will be upset if we just cold turkey take screens away. So small changes, again, can make a big difference over time. And we know that less screen time, more time on the floor playing with family members is what's best for development. So that's why we always want to kind of keep that conversation open with families that we serve in support of the child's language development and overall development, of course. So yes, thank you for sharing that. That was good. Okay, so those were some tips about kind of just creating a language-rich environment, singing songs, discussions about screen time, including kids in daily routines, sitting down and playing if you like to do that or if you're able to do that. But just
reading books. Some of I forgot to mention, like reading books before. It doesn't even have to happen all the time at nighttime before you go to bed. You can read it if your child's having a snack. Read the book while he's in the high chair. That's a perfect time, especially if you have a child who, he's never gonna listen to this book. And you also want to put, if you have a child who's not going to listen to a book, it's important to get a book that might be shorter, that might be something that's motivating to him or he or she. And then starting with maybe snack time, you can read to them in the bath. Think about ways you can read to them. Yeah,
I was just going to say the bathtub. Yeah. I had a parent, I get some of the best ideas sometimes from parents themselves that I work with.
Same here. Yeah.
We had a kiddo, he wasn't so interested in books. Mom knew, we had talked about the importance of books and building language development. And so she just came up with her own idea of reading to him while I was in the bathtub because he was contained. He couldn't get away from her, and she started with short, simple books, and we just built out from there his attention to books and his interest in books. And naturally that built his language and more communication for him. So yeah, that's a great idea. And books, we just love books. So they're so wonderful in supporting language. Yes. And communication. Good. Okay. So Kim, now let's talk about, so we've talked about when first words should emerge, what we should be listening for, what we should be looking for as far as communication is, how we can support this early language and communication development in little ones. If a parent is concerned though, that their child isn't meeting those communication milestones or isn't talking, when they should, first start talking, what should the parent do? Where can they go?
I am a big believer that if a parent has a concern, they should trust their gut and not necessarily listen to social media. I mean, I find that a lot of times people will post in these mommy daddy groups saying, I'm really concerned my child's not doing this. And then they're getting feedback from people who may not be experts, who may not know, and they may just not be getting the right advice. So I find that if you have a concern, usually the first person people go to are their pediatricians. So they'll go to their pediatrician, they'll say this. Some pediatricians are more proactive about referring them to the state services, and then some will do more of like a wait and see approach. But I believe that if you have a concern, to just get it, go to every state has some sort of early intervention system. I think in some states it's free, in some states, usually the evaluation I think is free in every state though, isn't it? I'm almost positive it is. So go to the state. There's like a child find number that you could find for your state. If you could, it's easy as Googling early intervention services in California, early intervention services in Colorado, and something should pop up for your area. So if you want to go through the state, you can. If you want to find a private practice, you can find a private practice in your area. You just want to make sure you find someone who specializes in working with the young kids, because a young toddler who's not talking is going to need a different approach than maybe like what a speech therapist who may only have experience working with, say, high school students. They may not give you the same strategies as someone who's going to be working with who's been working with young kids, for most of their career or something like that. So that's probably what I'd recommend. And if those options don't work for you for whatever reason, there's a wait list. You can also see if there is a graduate program in your state, because for instance in New Jersey sometimes there's a wait list for the services, and some people will go to a graduate program and get cheaper services but the services will be provided through the graduate clinician. And then the graduate clinician is supervised by a licensed and certified speech therapist.
Yeah, that's a great idea to check that out in your state if you have any universities with a communication sciences or speech language pathology program that have students that are training to support them too. That's a great idea. Yeah. And back to that, you mentioned, some pediatricians are more proactive about encouraging families to go ahead and make that referral or make the referral for the families to the early intervention services or to maybe a private practice that services young children with communication delays. Other pediatricians will tell you to wait and see. Not a fan of wait and see. I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah. And certainly as a parent myself, I understand that sometimes there's fear. You don't want to have your child evaluated because you don't want to hear that something isn't developing as it should, because that's scary as a parent, especially a first-time parent, I think. But I just always encourage parents to go ahead and just get the evaluation, even if the therapist feels the child needs therapy, if the therapist feels there is a communication delay or disorder. It doesn't mean that you have to jump into therapy right away. Just get the feedback. There may be no delay or disorder, then you can just clear your mind of that worry and not worry about it. But even from the evaluation, you'll probably get some good ideas. You'll learn more about your child. there's always gain in just learning more about your child and how best they can learn at the age they are and how you can support them better at home. So, I know you do too, just always support families and going ahead and just getting that evaluation just to see, and not waiting to see if the child catches up, because that's the thing. If in 6 months they don't catch up, then that gap of delay just grows and grows.
Grows. Totally
Right.
right. I absolutely agree.
And so
Yeah.
much change and development in the brain happens in those first 5 years. We can make such a huge impact with children that are struggling with development in those early years if we can get them to us, to the services. So yeah, parents, feel empowered, learn more about your child, seek out the help, follow your gut. I think that's a great advice. Always follow your gut, your instinct. We have these parental instincts for a reason. So don't deny them. Don't push them down. Just follow them.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So can we we already mentioned your website. What's the website address again? Just one more time.
So I have two websites. I have mytoddlertalks.com, and that is my website that's dedicated just to toddler language development, questions, activities, techniques. And then I have scanlonspeech.com. And I have some toddler stuff there, but it's also some preschool language development, some school age stuff, and some topics maybe are related to articulation or executive function or something like that. So a little different.
Okay, so you have both the websites, and I'll link those again in the podcast description for everyone. And then also, if anybody has any specific questions for you, now knowing that you specialize in this early language development with toddlers and preschoolers, if they maybe have one of your books or are interested in one of your books and want to ask you a question about those, how can the audience members reach out to you if they'd like to?
My email address is probably the best way for them to contact me. And on both websites, I have contact forms that they can fill out, and I get them and I can see.
Okay, good. And then you're also on social media, right? Can you share with us?
Yes, I am on social media. I am on Instagram and Facebook at Scanlon Speech. That's my tagline. That's my username, I think. Scanlon Speech.
Okay, good. And I'll link those also in the podcast description for everyone that's interested in reaching out to you. Kim, thank you so much for your time, for your willingness. Your enthusiasm to share your wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for these wonderful resources you've created, because we mentioned two of your resources, My Toddler Talks and My Toddler's First Words, but you also have a couple other resources. I have one of them. That's why she's excited. So Kim also created a book called Learning to Read is a Ball, and share with us what this book is about.
Oh, so, I am not someone who can come out with these books in a short amount of time. I think My Toddler Talks took about 2 years. Learning to Read is a Ball took about 2.5 years because I illustrated those pictures.
You did?
I did. My Toddler's First Words was 4 years because there's so much research that went into it. But Learning to Read is a Ball is a very playful book for preschoolers and toddlers. The toddlers, though, if they have a hard time turning the pages, it's soft cover. So the preschoolers, it's a book to encourage those early literacy skills. So learning about rhyming, learning about alliteration, the importance of telling a story. So it's a great book for when they're a little bit older.
Later toddler, preschool age. Okay. And then you also have a gratitude journal.
Oh, yes.
Share about that. Yes.
So I have a gratitude journal. A portion of the proceeds go to different charities. So last year I donated to St. Jude. And this year I haven't decided on where I'm going to donate yet. I mean, the gratitude journal is beautiful. I love it. I wish it would sell more, but because what inspired me for the gratitude journal was my daughter. I felt like I wanted to inspire her to embrace more appreciation for life, appreciation for the small things that she has in life. So I felt like writing in a journal, and it's very child friendly. There's pictures in it. So if they want to just like color something and think about what they're grateful for. Another thing that kind of inspired me to my daughter was the reason, but there's a really, really great book. It's called How to Raise Kind Kids. And the author and the subtitle is And How to Get a Happier Family in the Bargain. And I don't know what prompted me to read that book, because both my kids are very kind, but I thought it was probably one of the best parenting books I've read. And he's a psychologist, the author, and he talks about how gratitude is one of like the foundational virtues that propels us to be kind, to seek justice, to seek just a greater good for all of us. And I think it starts with something just as small as appreciating, you know what? I may not have everything, but I'm alive today and the sun is shining and the birds are tweeting, and I think those are just little things to remember, especially when we're a parent and we are worried about our kids.
Yes, right. And the bigger picture, sometimes we get too worried about the future, which is out of our control. So staying in the moment and being thankful and gracious for what's in front of us, and then teaching that to our kids so that they hopefully, as they grow and develop and mature, they can. And I love that. I'm going to have to read that book now, Kim. Thank you for the for the recommendation. But I love how you mentioned in his book, he talks about how gratitude is foundational for then other values and virtues, that we also want to instill in our children. So interesting. I love that. Okay, good. We'll check that out. But more than that, I want our audience to know about your books that you've authored, and to go check those out. And again, I'm going to link everything for you all so that you can check it out. Kim, again, it was a pleasure. It's been wonderful to actually connect with you virtually face to face after all these years. But thank you again for your time and for sharing your wisdom. Absolutely. And we wish you the best. And who knows, maybe we'll have you back in the future to talk about something else. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of More Than Child's Play podcast. Please follow us on Facebook, find us on Instagram at Milestones Miracles, and on Twitter at MilestonesM.